Jesus Christ, I haven't seen this much dust since 1816. Weren't you in a dungeon? I was.
So how would you know that there was a year without summer?
I read it in a book. How? Oh, Soma, my young friend. How unfortunate you believe delivery to be a modern invention. Dear Chaos, I can hardly damn near see anything. To be or not to be? That is the question. To be mortal or a god? That is the cycle. I am the monster that breathing men would kill. I am Cereza Valentine. Oh, come on. There. Better? Yup, that seems to do it. You're alive! Seems like those instructions on the back of the cereal box did work.
I'm sorry. What?
Anyway, now that our favorite countess is back and kicking, what are you going to do now? Oh, I have some amends to make. You don't possibly mean...
What the? Oh, lovely. It's just my luck that I get interrupted when practicing for the upcoming Castlevania Symphony. I'm coming, damn it! What? Oh, it's you. Didn't I kill you?
Yes, you definitely did.
So then what's the deal? Want to play another game where you get sent back to the other realm?
Oh, no. You misread my intentions.
Then why are you here?
I've come to apologize. In the only way that I know how.
And in what way would that possibly be? Oh my god, you're actually doing one about me.
To be a king, what does that mean? Is it to rule with divine right? Is it to rule with absolute power? Perhaps maybe even to lead a kingdom to a new era. The definition of a king is different to almost all who hear it. What differs even more is whether or not a king is a good king. Does a good king rule with integrity? Rule with might? But maybe a good king is one that lays the groundwork for someone greater to come after his reign. Whether by accident or on purpose, this is a story that is familiar to one and only one man, the former king of Castlevania and wielder of the Ebony Stone, Walter Bernhard. Debuting in the series start in Lament of Innocence, Walter Bernhard is one of the more unfortunately forgotten characters in the series. As if I were to do a poll amongst Castlevania characters, Walter would hardly make it past 10, being beaten out by characters like Dracula, Simon, Richter, Trevor, Sona, Alucard. Okay, yeah, you get the picture. Which is truly a shame considering the amount of lengths the Castlevania team were able to craft such an astounding, wondrous, nefarious, and alluring villain. But why do I bring this up exactly? Well, I have the belief that Walter Bernhard is the best villain that this franchise has ever seen.
How many times does this happen to you?
More than you think, less than you hope. Indeed. In a series filled to the brim with characters with motivation, design, character, and full-out villainy, out of all of them, one of them spoke loudest in that bunch, and it was Walter. Unlike his supposed cooler cousin, Walter has only made one appearance and one appearance only, being the game mentioned prior, Lament of Innocence, a game remembered for its unique style of model crafting.
Leon. It's too bad you aren't Walter.
Oh my, too bad. And I thought this would work so well.
But although he only showed up in one game, there is still a lot to gather about him. What makes him more unique from Dracula and other villains? What drives him to do what he does? Was he more powerful than Dracula ever was? All fair questions that we may never get answered due to decisions that were made. However, allow me, Cereza Valentine, to introduce to you the reasons as to why I believe Walter Bernhard, usurped King of the Night and King of the Ebony Stone, is the best villain in Castlevania history. One of the most compelling things about a character is the role that they play within a work of fiction, whether it be the protagonist or the antagonist. Our star of the show is Leon Belmont, starter of the grand lineage that would define the series for ages to come, and for ages long past. Which then leaves us with the ensemble cast of characters that we are left to decide is the main thread of the game. Is it Death? No, he is only in the final encounter and only shows up for like 4 minutes. Is it Matthias? Just because he orchestrated the whole thing doesn't make him the primary antagonist. A surprise, to be sure, but not the correct one. Is it Yahim? Although a vampire, yes, he primarily plays the role of secondary antagonist alongside Medusa and Succubus. But even he could hardly be called one considering how much little time we have spent with him. Which leaves us with only one man left. Kid fucking Dracula. Walter is the main villain of Lament of Innocence, and with that, allow me to express why Walter's story specifically is something worth delving into. Firstly, the way we are introduced to Walter is via the game's prologue. However, he is never mentioned by name, but if you need me to tell you that they are referring to Walter in a sentence with Eternal Night, Castle, and Vampire, then perhaps subtlety isn't in your realm of expertise. The predicament created is when Walter kidnaps Sarah Trontoul, who just so happens to be seeing Leon, if you catch my drift, essentially giving the hero a reason to venture off to fight this villain. Throughout the game though, we hardly see Walter up until we finally see him for the first time in the entrance of the Pagoda of the Misty Moon. However, from dialogue with different characters, Walter is just downright despicable. From what is either implied or stated from other characters, allow me to list the things Walter is personally responsible for. Killing Justine Gandolfi, turning Justine Gandolfi into a vampire. I have a theory that she is Succubus, but the comic for the game outright shows that isn't true, but whether or not the comic is canon to the game is something entirely up for debate. Imprisoned an eldritch horror and tortured it for a very long time. Killed possibly hundreds of people who played his game. Fought Yahim Armster and chained him in an underwater dungeon. You'll see why that's important later. Kidnapping Sarah Trontoul. Turning Sarah Trontoul into a vampire. Making deals with Death. Death drinks him like a Slurpee. Wait, that doesn't sound quite right. Yeah, despite his entire story in the game to simply be a stepping stone for something far grander, the story could have possibly gone a whole different direction. If Leon had been defeated by Walter, his reign of eternal terror would continue for hundreds of years to come. There would be no Dracula, there would only be Walter.
Welcome.
However, that is just speculation though. Another thing that makes Walter's story distinct is how rare it is to see a story like his play out. Especially in the Castlevania series, where we always expect the minor villain, then death, then Dracula. The minor villain and death part can be interchangeable. However, Lament of Innocence's story could have gone in so many different directions. For all we know, Walter could have been Dracula's entire time, and the story that we now know is the official one would have never been. Think about it. Walter is practically Dracula in every sense, minus personality and name. If the game ended with Walter being defeated, everyone would have assumed that Walter was Dracula and simply changed his name to Dracula and somehow found love. What I'm essentially saying is that for his role to be a way forward, his presence and overall actions throughout the game are not for naught, as they are all calculated to near perfection. Granted, that is more so because he got read like a fucking Twitter thread, but that's besides the point. Something that aids in this is something that every character requires to be distinct. That being... As they say, an interesting hero has to have an equally, or if not so, a more interesting villain. What else could Leon find such a man but to look towards Walter himself? In fact, no one would believe me if I said that Walter Bernhard is one of the most relatable villains in the series. But allow me to paint the picture. Walter, like most vampires, has a level of arrogance that would make people like Cell or Frieza from Dragon Ball quiver. However, the one thing that makes him so interesting is this: hunger. If anyone were to ever gain immortality, there are so many things that could be done with it. However, I know well that a certain group of people would never be satisfied. So, what would they do exactly once they sought everything that they wanted to do? Well, find ways to entertain themselves. No, not like that! Walter invents the game that Leon played in Lament of Innocence. He did so as a way to cure his boredom. To then add on to it, he shows little care to those playing his game, raising the tensions the closer they get. Hell, he doesn't even care about people he once considered allies. Take the story of Yahim, one of Walter's closest allies. Yahim fought Walter, and with his loss, he was restrained down to the Dark Palace of Waterfalls for eternity until his eventual end. In fact, Walter could be seen as Castlevania's very own Napoleon Bonaparte. Think about it. Both are men of high value and power. One was regarded as a king of the night, while the other was the Emperor of France. But something that the two definitely have in common is that their ambitions were what put an end to them. Napoleon's ambition to spread the ideas of the Republic and to spread his empire towards Europe's east were parts to his downfall. Similar to how Walter's end was met by a never-satisfied hunger for power and control. But returning to his boredom for a second, something that also supports this is the way he interacts with characters like Leon and his past interactions with other humans like Ronaldo. With Ronaldo, Walter could have easily killed him and been done with it after transforming his daughter into a vampire. But he didn't do that, now did he? Instead, he allowed him to live and stay in the Eternal Forest, helping anyone who falls into his trap. Seeing each adventurer never return alive from his castle. With Leon though, Walter toyed with him more than a toddler with toy trains. Take a look at this scene when Walter first meets Leon and notice his word choices.
Welcome to my castle. Pleased to meet you. I am the master of the castle, Walter Bernhard.
Give back Sarah!
Do not rush. Your lady is here.
Sarah! Why? Why won't she answer?
It seems the lady is tired. It seems you are too. Rest a while.
What?
Well, that whip is Ronaldo's, is it?
It can't be. My attack doesn't work.
I see. It's just as that knight said. Very well. You've made it this far. I'll return her as a reward.
Sarah!
I'll be in the throne room on the highest floor. I look forward to you making it there alive.
Notice how Walter never shows a frown or a negative emotion. He isn't taking anything that he has done with any form of sincerity. Not because he is evil, trust me, it's part of it, but the main reason is because he believes his need to be satisfied is more important. He doesn't care what he has to do to kill his boredom. If it means to become the most villainous of villains, or to have all the power in the world in his grasp. As long as his boredom is cured, nothing will really matter. Sounds like something a lot of us would do. We may not know how long Walter has been a vampire for, but it's easy to deduce that it must have been a long time. If Walter is willing to go to the lengths like the ones he went through just to get a dopamine high, the only time Walter shows any other emotion is when he is at his lowest. When his barrier is destroyed, when he is defeated by Leon, and then when his soul is taken and consumed to be used for someone else's lust for power. It shows that although Walter isn't the most tactitious or malevolent, his reasons and motives show that he was merely doing things to satisfy his own needs. Not some grandmaster plan to defy God, like someone I know, or some plan to get twisted revenge on someone. However, if he did come back, chances are he would get even. Regardless though, his motivation is something that I'm sure a lot of us, under his circumstances, would even find ourselves relating to. Castles, or as many kings from history's past may remember them being, dick measuring contests. Nothing speaks highly of a king's elegance, wealth, and power more than their place of residence. There have been many versions of Castlevania throughout the series. Sometimes the game centers around it, others focus on the eventual coming of it, while others don't even have it at all. Donosora. However, there is Walter's Castlevania, and something that I think that it has that not many other Castlevanias have been able to replicate to its similar level is a little thing called atmosphere. For example, the entrance of Walter's castle, although short, leaves a certain impression onto the player that many Castlevania games do not do. Sure, it's not the kind of entrance that something like Symphony of the Night or the first Castlevania do, but something that it does differently is to start off with a sense of foreboding, unease. You could feel how cold and empty this area is, and what you'd be expecting moving forward. It's also the entrance that leads to different areas, the training room, the portal room, the entrance to the Pagoda of the Misty Moon, and the roof of what many players may not know when first seeing it, but is of the Prison of Eternal Torture, housing a creature that no man could ever even think of facing and come out alive. Then there are the 5 main areas that you could go via the portal room, the House of Sacred Remains being the first one. I will say though, it is very funny in the ironic sense that each Castlevania game has a church or chapel area to some degree. When you know, the whole anti-god thing. Regardless though, amongst entering and exploring the area, the player could sense that something about the area is not right. It's a chapel, sure, but the area itself is filled with monsters who have long since departed from this realm of the living. Puzzles everywhere and constant roadblocks that would lead the player to question, what is so important to hide down here? The player would later find the basement of the chapel and see a catacomb underneath. It too houses its own set of puzzles, and once they complete all of them, leads them to a creature that has the description that reads the following: undead infested by parasites from working on constructing the filthy Great Shrine. This creature, similar to a tapeworm, resembled that of what false faith could lead to. The soulless beings in the chamber, which are the polar opposite to Leon, beings whose faith resided in the wrong person, and where it has led them. It has led to nothing more than being used by some greater being for malevolence. Then comes the garden forgotten by time, an area that shows the ruins of temples and, you guessed it, gardens. Like the House of Sacred Remains, this area too has its puzzles and does links to try and keep you from reaching every nook and cranny. However, there is an area in between the overgrown temple and the overgrown botanical garden. There is an area that changes the mood by music, making the area more foreboding than the other two. The area itself is ruthless, covered with man-eating creatures, specters, and skeletons. However, when finding a room near the end of the botanical garden area, you would find Medusa, a woman whose faith in Walter is unwavered, yet it would not save her from her fate. Her description reads, a legendary monster whose gaze can turn people to stone. Although this could be seen as me reaching to some degree, it's possible that Medusa or the garden as a whole is meant to resemble something similar to inauthenticity. Think about it. There are lights shining in, implying it to be day, while it's clearly night because, you know, eternal night thing. Then there are overgrown plants everywhere, which one could say are to hide the imperfections that the garden has, and to hide the illusion that it's an actual garden, which is why the only area that seems to be authentic is the area where the music changes. It hides dilapidation and ruin, albeit not too well. Similar to how characters within the story hide their true intentions with cons of either lies, half-truths, or even the truth itself. Like I said, a bit of a stretch, but it's nice to have a deep thought like this. After that is the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory, which, believe it or not, is one of the areas that represents the concepts and beliefs of alchemy to near perfection. Unlike the Netflix series, which says that alchemy is a science that goes against the acts of God, which definitely was a common misconception, in Lament of Innocence, the Mysteries Lab shows paintings from the Aurora Consagens, which is an alchemical treatise that is commonly affiliated with a historical alchemist, one named Thomas Aquinas. One of these murals resembles the conjoined opposites drawing from the treatise, which, if you think about it thoroughly, could be thought out to be the representation of the pact that Leon and Sarah make by fusing Sarah's soul into the Ronaldo's whip, creating the amalgamation of the vampire killer. That being said, though, the lab contains many alchemical rooms, libraries, and a chamber dedicated to the god Hephaestus. It's the lava room. Upon exploring these areas, the player would find a room with a large rock formation with an epitaph placed towards the wall with a hole in it with the word meth in it. If players didn't know better, you'd think this lab was owned by Walter White. Regardless of that, the player has to find a tablet with an E on it. Once found, you head back to the room with the epitaph and insert the tablet into the hole, which then forms the Hebrew word emeth or emet, which stands for truth. This summons a golem which, despite what it's supposed to do, chooses to attack Leon instead of aiding him, implying that Leon is not its creator, but Walter. Which is funny because its description reads, a man-made monster made of stone. If you ask me, he's anything but man-made. Golem in this game is definitely one of the more religiously accurate to the Jewish faith bosses, as far as other golems are concerned anyway. With the E-tablet, Emeth wrote on the epitaph, which is used to summon it to life, and practically everything else, minus the whole attacking you to your dead thing. You see, Abrahamics, this is why you don't leave your golems active on the Sabbath day. Well, at least I can tell you for sure what day of the week Lament of Innocence takes place on. The next area to go through is my personal favourite, and that being the Dark Palace of Waterfalls. And by waterfalls, I mean literally only one waterfall in the bridge area. Come on guys, you had one job. The basic premise here is if you took the idea of either a catacomb and or a cave and added water. Now, you think it doesn't mean much until you realize who the boss of this area is, which is Yahim Amster, whose description reads as follows. He was turned into a vampire by Walter, and imprisoned because he rebelled. Well, that was a nice gross oversimplification. Now, although I don't think the description does the story justice, it is exactly what his story is. Yahim himself is an interesting character, whom I may touch on one day. Not like that. However, we are here to explain why his involvement in Walter's castle makes Walter's castle all that much better. Oh, and remember how this place is filled with water? Well, I remember saying something about rivers and water when I covered Castlevania Nocturne, and I remember being corrected and or having my question answered that vampires could not cross running or water. Or just water in general, as it feels like acid to the touch. I think you're starting to understand where I'm getting at here. So not only did Walter imprison Yahim for his attempted rebellion in a locked dungeon, but on top of that, he put him in an area covered to the brim with running water, and deep caverns and ravines that are most likely filled with water. If you think being a human in Alcatraz is bad, imagine being a vampire and being stuck in this place. Yeah, it would not be fun, and a little extreme, but what can I say? We vampires love having fun around here. It's easy to say that Yahim, in retrospect, to Leon, could be his opposite, as Yahim was what Leon would become if he had failed his mission in defeating Walter, albeit their reasons differ, as do their circumstances. The last area to cover from the Porter Room is the Ghostly Theatre, and it is exactly what you'd expect. The entire area is a theatre, however I will say the second floor gives me the biggest heebie-jeebies I have ever had the displeasure of experiencing. As although the layout and design of the rooms don't change, what does is the music, and that change is what makes this area one of the more disturbing places to visit in the entire game. Granted, it would have helped to make the environment suit the music, like adding fog or making the rooms abandoned, bleak and monochrome, but that is just my opinion. Moving past that, this place is home to Succubus, whose description reads as follows. A monster that sucks up a person's essence by taking advantage of their feelings. Although in the game they established that they aren't Justine Gandolfi, I find it hard to believe that Walter turned Ronaldo's daughter into a vampire, which killed her family, and the only female vampire we see at all is Succubus. Yeah, I call bullshit on the fact that it says that Justine is a follower of Succubus rather than Succubus herself. You know what, whatever. In regards to the messaging of the area, it could be a play on how Walter views this entire scenario. A game or a play, if you will. It doesn't help either, with some kaleidoscope vision, Succubus is reminiscent of Walter due to their overconfidence and arrogance. However, that seems to be a common vampire trait in these parts. Also, apparently Succubus fought Ronaldo as his own daughter. Konami, you can't tell me you'd be surprised if people think Succubus is Justine. The only areas left really are the Prison of Eternal Torture and the Pagoda of the Misty Moon. The Prison of Eternal Torture, like the castle's entrance, is fairly short. However, it leaves a lasting impact due to a variety of reasons. First being the eldritch feeling one gets when entering it. Granted, when you first enter it, you probably won't get very far until late game when you are given the key to enter the area. If you haven't been told to fuck off before by the literal demon you could see underneath you, then perhaps the other sign to do so is the long stairs that feel like they were stripped straight from the other world from Silent Hill. If you still haven't, then congratulations! You have purchased a one-way ticket to hell! Say hello to the Forgotten One, a creature stated by its description to be a man-made monster eternally sealed away due to an enormous uncontrollable power. And maggots, whose description reads, a maggot that devours the Forgotten One. I have a history with this creature, so I will refrain from saying its name 3 times or else it will try to devour me again. Moving on from that, we only have the Pagoda of the Misty Moon. And as far as final areas are concerned, it's one of the best ones. You could definitely tell this is an area overseen by Walter, as it practically has everything expensive. Marble interiors, red carpets with candles to light everything, and hallways tighter than... I was going to say the bond of friendship. Yeah. Please don't hurt me, I just got resurrected. Plus, this area allows for a view of the outside world. And by outside world, I mean literally the void, so enjoy the view while it's there. Despite my joking, this area is really pretty, as hardly any other in the series could compare to it. With all the areas really discussed, I think it's fair to see why I love this version of Castlevania so much, and why it adds a credence to Walter being the best villain. But if you think that's all I've got, then trust me, there's more in the chamber. Is he here? I'm not showing it if he's here. He's not? Well, alrighty then. Ow! If this continues, I might see the end of a concussion. Yeah, similar to Matthias, my views on Walter's design are practically the same. I love it, down to his medium-length red hair, his variety of different browns, reds, golds, and blacks that are spread out so thoughtfully across his design are just something that can only happen once every 100 years. And resurrection, but who cares about that? Which, by the way, turns out his red hair has meaning. Yeah, you think they did it just because it looked nice, which is possible, but it has roots to Romanian beliefs of vampires called Strigoys. Humans that become vampires once they've passed on. Which possibly means that instead of becoming a vampire the conventional method, Walter became a vampire after he had died. I will say, there is an animation opportunity there, as it would be cool to see a cutscene or so of him waking up from the dead to see that he is now a vampire. Returning to me being obsessive, his long black cape with an inner color that has the prettiest of desaturated reds, his gloves, so exaggerated yet so beautiful, his proudly bronze armor with the gorgeous shoulder pads that resemble that of bat wings, his black shirt with accents of red that were made with the finest of cloth, his accessories adorned from his neck all the way down to his very boots are simply marvelous. The boots are just adorned with a knightly beauty that could hardly be found anywhere else. With knee pauldrons made to look like the head of a bat, everything about Walter's design is breathtaking. And it's no wonder why Walter thinks so highly of himself. I mean, look at him. Once again, we have to thank the beautiful mind that had made such a beautiful character. That being the legendary artist, Ayami Kojima. Her art is an integral part to the Castlevania series as Yoshitaka Amano's artwork is to Final Fantasy, or Akira Toriyama's artwork to Dragon Quest. Rest in peace. I thank her once again for giving me something else to shower with adoration. The final reason isn't as much as a reason as it is a way to showcase the similarities and differences between Walter and Dracula. So I'm just going to start it off with these similarities and then we'll just move on to the differences. Starting with similarities, we have both Dracula and Walter have been the main villain of their game. Both have similar movesets to one another. Both were rulers of the night and of Castlevania. Both are inspired by the likes of Matthias Corvinus and Vlad the Impaler. Both have alternate bat/demon forms. Both had a stone that granted them power. Both are massive manipulators. Both have a similar sense of interior design. But now for the differences, which there are plenty. Other than their basic design silhouette, Walter's design varies in many ways compared to the vast amount of interpretations Dracula has had. Walter's personality and purpose are different from that of Dracula's. Walter can transform into a demon creature mid-fight. Dracula cannot. Dracula got his powers from absorbing Walter's soul, while Walter had been either given his powers upon becoming a vampire, or by the enhancements from the Ebony Stone. Walter has the Ebony Stone, Dracula has the Crimson Stone, yet no one has the Philosopher's Stone, to anyone's knowledge. Dracula has death, Walter no longer seems to have him. Dracula has had 2 wives, a son, and a niece. Walter is never said to have any of those things. Dracula's lineage, past himself, is never stated. Meanwhile, we know who Walter's mother is. For some reason. Dracula's legacy has heavy weight within the Castlevania series and to many of the fans of the series. Meanwhile, Walter's name and legacy are only recognized for those who play Lament of Innocence. I'm sure there are more differences and similarities that I have yet to find or really think about between the two, so if there are any, please consider commenting below as to what your findings are. But as far as I'm concerned, that is all I have to present on this matter. Hopefully by this point you all would have been able to see why I believe Walter to be a unique specimen within the Castlevania series. Sure, he's no Isaac from the anime, where his story is made to make him seem sympathetic, and sure, he is an Alucard, a character whose story seems to always have a beginning but never an end. However, something that Walter has that no other Castlevania fan can claim that he doesn't is definitely the fact that he is Walter Bernhard. And I am honestly thankful for everything that his essence has ever touched. Without him, the entire story of Castlevania as we know it would be drastically different.
That was... Oh my god, I have tears in my eyes. That was the most thoughtful thing I have ever heard you say about me.
Well, Walter, what can I say? I think very highly of you. And in fact, there's hardly any Castlevania character, well, that's left, that I've met, that I can honestly say I've had the best experiences with. Hell, you were there when my channel got big, and you stayed. For a while. And now that we're here, we can only hope for things to go back to normal from this point onward. However...
Wait a minute. What do you mean, however?
Like all sagas, there has to be a conclusion. And luckily or unluckily for us, I know exactly what that conclusion will be.